Thursday so far. Does anyone out there love when it rains as much as I do? Like I'm a weirdo? Yes. Thank you, Viasia. One person. I love it. It's put me in a good mood today. My day's only going to get better because I get to spend the next little bit with you all, which is so fun. And hopefully I've met a lot of you all by now. But if not, my name's Kate Grounds, and I'm technically on staff full-time with Lewis House, which is the building right behind us. But I get to help out with CSF too, including kind of hopping up on stage and preaching every now and then. And I love it. I tell people all the time, you guys are my absolute favorite audience to preach to. You're just so fun. I love the energy. It's so fun every time I get to come up here. And tonight I'm excited because we're going to wrap up this 3-week series we've been in on sex, love, and dating. If you guys enjoyed this series so far? Yeah, okay. Thank you. Thank you for the energy. But I'm really excited for tonight because I get the joy and honor of talking to you about dating. Yeah, let's talk about it. It's going to be fun. I obviously didn't get married super young. If you look at my left hand, you'll see I'm currently not married, which means I'm in the dating game with you. I'm right there with you. Thank you. So I do understand from firsthand experience the frustrations and challenges of modern day dating culture, and just kind of a little bit of background on this area of my life so you kind of understand where I'm coming from. I went on a good handful of dates throughout my 20s. I'm 30 currently. I've been in a 3-month relationship. I've been in a 3-year relationship. And I'm currently in a relationship with a guy I've been dating for about 8 months, which is, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. His name's Alex. He's a cool one. But that's one of the reasons this topic has been on my mind a lot this year. And to be real with you guys, I've made some mistakes and learned a lot along the way. I am by no means a perfect dater, and my hope is to translate the years I've had to spend wading through this topic and thinking through this topic into some type of practical wisdom for you all tonight. And I'll be real, one of the reasons I love talking about dating is I don't know if any of you guys are like this, but I love bad date stories. Like I do. I would never wish it on anybody in this room, but like something about a good bad date story just gets me. In fact, one of the times I've laughed the hardest in the past few years was when me and my best friend Peyton from college, we went out to eat, and we spent the entire evening like going through our entire friend group in college's like worst dating moments and ranking them, and we were just like crying over chips and salsa by the end. It was so good, and we realized, okay, we've kind of been through it in this area. We've had some moments, but nothing will ever beat this bad date story I saw on TikTok by Elise Myers. I think it's the one that made her go viral. Check this out.
What's the worst first date I've ever been on? I'm so glad you asked. I'm going to tell you right now. Before I met my smoke show of a husband, I was on dating apps, as you do. This man messages me out of the blue, and he goes, I like your face. Let's go get some food. I love food. Are you my soulmate? He says, meet me at my house. I will drive us to the restaurant together. Why did we not just meet there? I have no idea. I drive 45 minutes to his house. He's standing outside of it. He walks up to my car, and he goes, I've lost my keys. Can you drive us there? Should I have just left him right there and gone home? Yes. Did I? Absolutely not. He gets in, starts giving me turn-by-turn directions. He could have been leading me to an abandoned warehouse, and he still would have been like, left at this stop sign? Okay. We end up at a Taco Bell, which is fine. I'm like, dine-in or drive-through? And he's like, drive-through. And I'm like, great, he has a plan. We get to the speaker, and he just leans over and goes, I would like 100 hard-shell tacos, thank you. We get to the window. He does one of these numbers. I'm like, did you forget your wallet? He's like, yeah. I was like, do you need me to pay? He's like, yeah. I'm like, yeah. I buy the 100 tacos, and I'm like, where to next? And he goes, back to my house. And I was like, okay, this is happening. I'm committed to this now. It's happening. We get to his house, we walk in, his dad is on the couch. I'm like, he lives with his dad. It's fine. The hoops I am teleporting through to convince myself that this decision that I have made is okay is just wild. Walk past his dad into the kitchen. He just starts emptying the boxes of tacos, just releasing them onto the table. Puts 2 chairs at the table, sits down, and he just screams at the top of his lungs, let's feast. I am just calmly unwrapping my taco and taking a bite of it We are eating hard-shell tacos in complete silence. You can hear both of us chewing. It's absolute chaos. The dad walks up, grabs a taco. There's 100 of them. We have so many to spare. He's eating over us, just like standing. Doesn't sit. Stands right next to the table. Crunches, mouth full. He just looks at me and he goes, "Do you want to see my studio?" And I was like, I have never wanted to see anything less in my entire life. It was that moment that I decided this date was completely over, or else I was going to be killed, 100%. I am now just like collecting the tacos because I paid for them. I walk out with boxes of tacos in my purse. I look back and I was like, thank you for this experience. You will never hear from me again.
I mean, it do be tough out there, y'all. It do be tough. I know. I love Elise Myers. She's funny. Well, hopefully you leave here tonight feeling a little bit more encouraged than she does in that video about modern day dating. But in all seriousness, as I've kind of thought about and prayed over tonight, I have just been continually been reminded how good God's timing is. Because I find it so fitting that in the midst of this 3-week series on sex, love, and dating, that you guys in your core groups are studying and unpacking the wisdom literature. Like, the more I've thought about that, I don't think that's a coincidence, because as you're learning in your groups, as you read through the wisdom literature in the Old Testament, the Bible doesn't always give us straightforward answers to these really specific questions we have about life. The Bible won't tell you what to major in, where to live after you graduate, who to marry, and it can feel really, really frustrating, especially when it comes to this topic about dating, because I'm not sure if you know this, but dating as we know it was not a thing in the Bible. Like, dating is kind of a modern day invention. It's not like you can just flip to the Old Testament and read the 10 commands about dating. If you could, I think thou shalt not ghost someone would be in there. I'm just going to say that. I think that's true. But that can leave us kind of assuming that the Bible has nothing relevant to say when it comes to this area of our lives. And why the Bible won't tell us what to wear on a first date or how to ask someone out or when to say I love you, it does point us in the general direction of a life well lived. It teaches us to think like God thinks and love like he loves. And as we kind of internalize the core principles we find throughout the Bible, we will slowly learn what it looks like to approach dating in a godly way. And I thought it was important to say that up front in this sermon tonight, because what I don't want you to do is to take what I say tonight and turn it into some kind of weird checklist. Like, I remember being in college and just so badly wishing somebody would hop on stage and give me like this perfect 5-step plan to finding the amazing godly spouse. And to be frank with you, it's just not that simple. It's not that straightforward. And so my heart tonight is not to give you a checklist, but to give you some guiding biblical principles that will help you figure out how to date well in college and beyond. Because here's the thing, even if you take everything I say up here tonight to heart and you put it into action, you are still going to need to rely on your godly community, and you're still going to need to rely on the Holy Spirit when it comes to this area of your life. No sermon, no podcast, no book about dating is ever going to erase your need to rely on godly community and the Holy Spirit when it comes to this area. And I really do think that's the beauty of the God we serve. Because he actually wants a relationship with us. He wants to be a part of every area of our lives, including this one. And learning to trust God with this area of our life, it's not a one-time decision. It's an ongoing thing. And if I could be real with you guys, like looking back throughout my 20s, very few things have grown this area of my life quite like this one when it comes to my relationship with God. Because you all know, like, it's a sensitive one. Very few areas of life hit our core fears and desires and vulnerabilities quite like this one. Like, when it comes to dating, it can feel scary and exciting and frustrating and exhilarating all at the same time, just hits all the feels. And so continually bringing this area of your life to the Lord, it will grow your faith in really unique ways. He's more interested in using this area of your life to deepen his relationship with you than just kind of giving you some perfect 5-year plan or 10-step checklist to finding the perfect spouse. Because if he did that, we wouldn't have to actually rely on him along the way. Y'all with me on that? Cool. All right, with that being said, let's jump right in. We got a lot of ground to cover in the next 20-ish minutes. And for my type A people in the room, any type A people? Love you all, my people. Just to give you a little bit of a preview of where we're going, I'm going to break this sermon into 3 sections. First, I'm going to talk about why we date. Then I'm going to talk about who to date, and then finally, I'm going to talk about how to date. I'm going to spend the most time in that last section, the how to date section, because I think this is where we get the most confused and tripped up. And I don't normally do this, but if you're a note taker, it might be a good one to take notes. I'm going to try to give you a lot of practical advice, and we're going to fly through a lot of content, so maybe a good night to take notes. But let's jump right in and start with why we date. Why do we date? Simply put, we date so we can find someone to marry. You know, as Christians, we believe that marriage is a good and a beautiful gift from God. Matt Reagan did a great job unpacking a biblical vision for marriage last week, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this tonight, although I do encourage you to go back and listen to his message and Brian's message the week before. If you didn't get a chance to, it's really good. But I just want to put an exclamation point besides what Matt said last week, and that's that we date with the end goal of marriage in mind. We date with the end goal of marriage in mind. We don't date just to kill time or prop up our own egos or fill some emotional void. We date so we can eventually find someone to marry. Which means if you have a desire to get married, if that's something you want out of your life, and you are eventually going to have to go on some dates. Unless you want to do the whole arranged marriage thing, which if you do, let me know how it goes. I think it's fascinating. I think it's half the reason I find shows like Love is Blind so fascinating, because it's just an interesting concept. Unless you want to go that route, you're going to have to put yourself out there and eventually go on some dates. But we date to find somebody to marry. As Christians, we see dating as an evaluation period to help us figure out if we want to marry someone or not. And I want to say a quick note on this idea of desiring to be in a relationship before we hop on to the next section, the who to date section. And I just want to encourage and remind you guys that desiring to be in a relationship is not the same thing as idolizing it. Desiring to be in a relationship is not the same thing as idolizing it. It is very normal and natural to desire to be in a romantic relationship. Like Matt talked about this last week. Brian talked about this the first week. God hardwired us in such a way where we want to have deep and lasting relationships with people, including people of the opposite sex. But sometimes in Christian communities, I think we accidentally demonize our desire to date, and we assume that merely wanting to be in a relationship automatically means that we're idolizing it. Like, I cannot tell you throughout my 20s, and I was single for a lot of my 20s, how many people would say something along the lines of this to me, like, oh, well, like, dating's going to happen when you just, like, least want it or least desire it, or, like, it's going to happen when you finally stop looking for it. And I just want to be real with you guys. I think that's trash theology. I really do. Because it implies you have to be completely detached from this desire to be in a healthy enough place to date. It's honestly more Buddhist than it is Christian. It's much more Buddhist approach to our desires than it is a healthy Christian one. Now, we can idolize a relationship. That absolutely can happen. But here's what that actually looks like. We idolize a romantic relationship when we attach all our value and self-worth to it. When we expect another human being to be our ultimate source of meaning and love and security, that's when we've kind of tiptoed towards idolization. Because we're trying to get from a boyfriend or a girlfriend what we can ultimately only get from God. That's idolizing relationships. Simply desiring to be in one and waiting until you find the right person is not. I just felt it was important to say that before we move on. You guys with me? Cool. All right, but we date to find someone to marry. If you hope to eventually have a spouse, if that's a desire God has planted in your heart, which is a good and healthy and natural desire, then you're going to have to go on some dates to eventually achieve that end goal. But let's go ahead and move on to the who to date section. For time's sake, I'm just going to shoot you all real straight here on this one. If you are a Christian, date other Christians. If you claim to follow Jesus, it's really important you date people who also follow Jesus and believe in his teachings. And here's why. I want to kind of get behind the heart of why that's the case. As Christians, we believe that our main purpose in life is to become like Jesus and to live in such a way that brings honor and glory to him. Like, that is every single person in this room's main calling as a believer. Which means anything else we do in this life, including the jobs we take, the things we consume, the people we date, should all be aimed at that singular goal. And this is what largely makes Christian marriages different from non-Christian marriages. Like, tons of non-Christians get married every year. Marriage is a very normal thing. But as Christians, we believe that marriage itself should fit under this larger calling of our lives. And so if our main goal is to become like Jesus, then marriage should help, not hinder us in that goal. Which means we want to marry someone who shares this vision for our lives and will partner with us in chasing after Jesus. I can't say it better than Tim Keller says it in his really good book. It's called The Meaning of Marriage. I don't know if any of you guys have read it. We actually sell it for like $10 out of the Lewis House Library. I read it when I was single. It's exceptionally helpful. Highly recommend. Shameless plug. But listen to what Tim Keller says in this book. He says, when two Christians stand before the minister all decked out in their wedding finery, they realize they're not just playing dress up. What they're saying is that someday they're going to be standing not before the minister, but before the Lord. And they hope to hear God say, well done, good and faithful servants. Over the years, you've lifted one another up to me. You sacrificed for one another. You held one another up with prayer and thanksgiving. You confronted each other. You rebuked each other. You hugged and you loved each other, and you continually pushed each other towards me. And now look at you. You're radiant. Romance, sex, laughter, and plain fun are the byproducts of this process of refinement. Those things are important, yes, but they can't keep the marriage going through years and years of ordinary life. What keeps the marriage going is your commitment to your spouse's holiness. I know, it's a good word. So that's my first piece of advice. Date other Christians. Date someone who values the same things as you do so you can avoid having to break up down the road when you realize you ultimately have a very different approach to marriage and you want different things out of life. And date other people, or date people who don't just say they love the Lord, but actually show it in the way they act. Like, we're in the South. There's lots of people who claim to follow Jesus. So you should be asking yourself questions to kind of assess, okay, do they actually mean it? Do they actually love the Lord? Are they involved in a church community? Do they treat people in a godly way? Do they serve anywhere? We're all very much in process during our younger years, especially in college. You're never going to find anyone perfect. You guys are growing, other people are growing, but you want to at least look for someone who's trying to become like Jesus in their day-to-day life. So if you're a believer in this room, if you claim to follow Jesus, you want to look for someone who's also trying to love and follow Jesus. But what about beyond that? Because that feels like the absolute bare minimum for what you should look for in somebody you date. So, let's go ahead and assume this person is a Christian. What should you look for beyond that? How should you know if you should give somebody a shot or not? The best advice I can give you when it comes to who to date is don't compromise on important things, but don't die on shallow hills. Don't compromise on important things, but don't die on shallow hills. Look, we all got our preferences when it comes to dating. We're all naturally drawn to a certain type of look or personality or aesthetic. That's very normal. But when we start getting really, really specific on the shallow things, we start being like, he's got to be 6'2", he's got to have blonde hair and blue eyes. If he doesn't love the same band that I do, he's done. He can never wear anything cringy in his life. When we start getting that intense about our list, what we can do is we can accidentally box God in. And I'm going to be real with you guys. If that's you, if you have shallow things that specifically on your list, I just want to encourage you. I just want to challenge you. Look inward and kind of ask yourself, where is that coming from? Why do you need someone who looks a certain way or makes a certain amount of money? Is that coming from a healthy place? Is it coming from a place of woundedness? Is it coming from a place of vanity? Look inwards. Ask those hard questions. Because I love you all. I do think we've been getting a little out of hand with the icks. It's a lot. You know what I mean. One of my favorite accounts on TikTok is this guy. It's just called, his whole account is just called the Ick List. I don't know if any of you guys have seen this. And he just goes around and, interviews women about, the icks that cause them to, walk away from a guy. And they're pretty nuts. Some of my favorite, one of them was this girl was I saw this man jump on a trampoline and I was done. That was it. He did it in a non-graceful way. I'm like, stuff. Or my absolute favorite one was some girl said, if I see a guy get hit by a car, ick. And I'm like, my gosh, you're going to be like, hey, it's been a good run. Good luck in the hospital, brother. Stuff. Or here's the last one. I don't know if you guys ever played the game Perfect in Every Way. It's actually a really fun game, but I played this game with some of you all at one point. And the prompt was perfect in every way, but they have an Android. And most of the students were like, nope, deal breaker. I'm done. If it's not an iPhone, I can't do it. Which I know is funny. We all got our preferences. We all got our icks. But here's the thing. This is actually really important. Here's the thing. God can actually surprise you. I've seen him do it. It can happen time and time again. In fact, one of my absolute favorite questions to ask people who have been together a really long time is if they ended up with who they thought they ended up with. Like, did the person they end up with fit the vision they had in their head? And most people will say no. Most people will say the person they ended up with, like, did not fit this perfect, ideal person they had in their mind. Some people do. A small percentage of people will say, yep, that's exactly who I thought I was going to end up with. But most people don't. And, like, I actually think that's really, really interesting. Even what this has looked like in my own life. This is funny, but I've lived with the same girl for 5 years. Her name's Allison. Shout out to Allison's group. Yeah, you guys are great. They take over our apartment every Tuesday night. But I always kind of troll Allison because, like, 2 weeks before she met her now fiance, she looked at me and she said, I'll never date a nerd. I won't do it. I won't do it. And I was like, all right. And then she went on this date. And you know what? The guy she's engaged to, he's a delightful, well-rounded nerd. He's back there right now. Yeah. Shout out to the nerds in the room. But no, like, he's great. He's well-rounded. He loves the Lord. And she would tell you, if she could hop on stage and tell you, she would say she didn't settle at all. She was just open to being pleasantly surprised. There's a difference there. She didn't settle. She was just open to being pleasantly surprised. And I know there's a thin line here. I understand that. What I'm not telling you, what I don't want you to take away from this, is that you have to date every single Christian that asks you out. Like, I'm not trying to teach you to gaslight yourself into thinking, well, they love the Lord, therefore I have to be with them. That's not what I'm saying. Sometimes you go out with them and you just aren't feeling it, and it's not that deep. I've been on dates with people, and that's happened to me, and vice versa. But sometimes you do need to let go of your sallow checklist and just give someone a shot. If they genuinely love the Lord, if you're at least a little attracted to them, and if the people closest to you think it's worth a shot, like, I want to encourage you, at least consider going out with them. I don't mean you have to, but, like, surely what's the worst that could happen? You go on a date or two, doesn't work out, like, it's not the end of the world. It's going to be fine. You'll move on. Again, there's no formula I can give you, and that's part of what makes dating feel really frustrating. But when someone asks you out who loves the Lord, I'd encourage you to genuinely pray about it and ask the opinion of the people you trust. Don't compromise on the important things, but don't die on shallow hills. That's the best advice I can give you when it comes to who to date. All right, let's go on to our last section, the how to date section. There's so much I could say when it comes to how to date well, but for time's sake, I trimmed it down to 3 pieces of advice. And the first thing I'd advise you to do if you want to date in a healthy and godly way is to be intentional without being intense. Be intentional without being intense. I'm going to be real with y'all. This is my personal pet peeve with Christian dating culture. I think a lot of times we mistake intentionality for intensity, and it sucks all the lightheartedness and fun and joy out of dating. Because if, like, dates the entire time just feel exhausting and full of pressure and draining, the enemy is winning on this one. It should at least be a little fun, like just a little bit. And where I see kind of this intensity most creep in is this weird expectation we put on ourselves and put on each other to know if we're going to marry someone after the first date. If they come home, are they the one? I don't know. We just had tacos. I don't even know their middle name. Like, calm down. Or to know if you have to marry them after the 3rd date, or to know if you're going to marry them to enter into a relationship with them. Like, that's a lot of pressure, and ignores the fact that dating and getting to know somebody is a process. Song of Solomon, which I know you guys are going to study here in a few weeks, tells us in Song of Solomon 8:4 not to awaken love until the proper time, which is a good reminder that genuine love takes time to nurture and develop. It's not something that can happen overnight. So please hear me say this. Hopefully this is a freeing thing for you to hear. You don't have to know if you want to marry them to go on a date with them. You don't have to know if you want to marry them after the 3rd date. You don't have to know if you want to marry them to enter into a relationship with them. And if it helps, here's what that's looked like in my own life. I told you I'm in a relationship. Like, when I went out with the guy I'm now dating, like, asked my community, they're like, yeah, it's a great idea. Went out, had a fun time. I didn't get home and was like, my gosh, wedding bells 6 months from now. Write it down. No, I got home and I was like, you know, that was really fun. Like, I had a fun time. He was sweet. I enjoyed getting to know him. I know he loves the Lord. I'll go out again. We went out a few more times. And even before we got to, like, the stage where we entered a relationship, I still wasn't like, I'm 100% sure. I just got to the point where I trusted his character. I knew he loved the Lord. My community thought it was a good idea. We had fun. We had good conversations. I just got to the point where I'm like, I think I would regret not giving it a shot. I'm at least curious to give it a shot and see how it goes. And what most surprised me about myself in that process is I had to really fight the urge to be too intense. Like, I could just sense in myself, like, I wanted to have every deep conversation, ask every super hard question before we even dated. And I had to take a kind of step back and reflect on that. And like, I realized for me, like, that was coming from a place of fear. Because I didn't want to be vulnerable, because I'd been hurt before. I just wanted to check everything off the list and get everything out in the open. And like, the Holy Spirit just genuinely convicted me that I wasn't honoring him by doing that I actually needed to take a step back, take a breath, trust the Lord, trust what I had seen so far, and just give it a shot. But date with purpose, but remove the pressure. Be intentional without being intense. That's my first piece of advice. My second piece of advice when it comes to how to date is to communicate in an honoring way. Kind of similarly, I've been asking all the couples in my life, some who are newly married, some that have been married a long time, hey, what is like the one piece of advice you'd have to somebody who recently entered a relationship? Literally every single one would say something along the lines of learn to communicate well. Learn to communicate with the person you're dating or going on dates with in an honoring way. Romans 12:2 says this. It tells us to honor and love each other with genuine affection and to take delight in honoring one another. I love that. We should take delight in honoring the people we date. And one of the main ways we honor them is with our words, by communicating in a clear, honest, and kind way through each stage of a relationship. So I want to really quickly just walk you through the different stages of a relationship and what it looks like to communicate in an honoring way. I want to really spell this one out for you guys. So let's start at the beginning. Let's say you start developing feelings for someone. You guys say catch feels. I don't get that, but I've heard you say it. You find someone cute. You want to go from friends to more than friends, or you don't even know them. You just saw them and want to give it a shot. If that's you, if there's somebody you want to go from not friends or friends to more than friends with, my best piece of advice, just be clear about your intentions. Be clear. If you want to ask them out, it's very, very helpful to use the word date. Like when you just invite them, like, hey, come, if you just want to come over and watch a movie with me and my roommates, you're just kind of, what is that? Is it a date? Is it not? I'm not sure. Like, should I be putting on perfume? Is it just me hanging out with the bros? Like, you just don't know. It's really helpful to use clear language. It's helpful to say, hey, I like you. Like, can I take you out to get a coffee? Can I take you on a date? Can I get to know you a little bit better? And then after you go out with them, whether you're feeling it or not, hear me on this, it's honoring to follow up and let them know where your head's at. If you're not feeling it, don't ghost them. Don't do it. It's the worst. If you're following the prompting of the Holy Ghost, he will not lead you to ghost someone. I cannot say that enough. It's not an honoring way to treat someone. If you've been there, you know it puts you in this super weird, like anxious headspace where you're just like, dude, like what's going on? Did I say something? Did I do something? It's exhausting. So if you're not interested in someone after you go out with them, that's okay. That's fine. That happens. Just kindly let them know. Call them, say it in person, text, say, hey, like, it doesn't have to be a huge thing. Just like, hey, I had a great time. Thank you so much for your time. Like, I don't think I see this going anywhere, but I'm still super grateful you came on this date with me. It doesn't have to be anything super crazy or deep. And if you are interested, maybe you go out with them and you're like, nah, I'm feeling this. I want to keep going. Let them know. And I think this goes both ways for guys and girls. I think sometimes girls put so much pressure on guys to do literally everything. We forget that, like, guys get in their heads too. Like, it's vulnerable for guys to go on dates. Like, if you're out with someone and you like it's fine to be like, hey, I had a great time tonight. I'd love to go out again. I think both guys and girls can do that. But clarity is kindness. Using the word date, letting them know if you're interested in going out again or not, having a check-in convo after a few dates are really, really helpful things to do to save somebody the headache of trying to figure out where you stand. Because it could be wrong, but I've never met someone who just adores being in a situationship. Like, I've never met someone who's like, I knew they were the one when we were in a gray area, and we went out in public, and we ran into some of his friends, and he didn't know how to introduce me, so he just kind of let me stand there awkwardly. Like, no, nobody loves that. Like, it sucks. So communicate. It's a good way to honor each other when it comes to dating. But now let's go to the next stage. Let's say you decide to make it official. What can you do once you're inside a relationship to honor one another with your words? If you've heard sermons on dating before, you're probably familiar with what's referred to as the triangle of intimacy. I should have a little graphic. Yeah. And so the idea is that as you date, you want to slowly grow in all three categories over the time, understanding that marriage is like the ultimate expression of all three categories. Which means that while we're in a dating relationship with someone, we want to create boundaries in each one of these categories so we don't accidentally give too much of ourselves too early on and experience the repercussions down the road. Now, I wish I had time to get into each one of these categories and talk about what it looks like to have healthy boundaries. But for time's sake, I want to focus in on just one area, and that's the emotional intimacy category. And more specifically, I want to talk about what it means to have good emotional boundaries in a dating relationship. Because one of the best ways to honor each other once you actually start dating is to set up some healthy emotional boundaries. I think we spend a lot of time in Christian circles talking about the physical boundaries part of the triangle, which is great, all 4 physical boundaries, obviously. But I don't think we spend enough time talking about the other 2 parts of the triangle because they're really, really important too. And here's what I mean when I say emotional boundaries. As much as you can, try not to let your emotions get the better of you and lead you to say really weighty statements like, I love you, or I want to be with you forever, until you've really thought them through and you're ready for them to mean what they mean. To put it in y'all's language, don't love bomb. Don't write emotional checks you can't cash. Or, I don't know if there's any 1975 fans out there. Thank you. But they have a good line in a song. They say, don't get caught up in the moment and think you're in love with the girl. And I actually think that's pretty good relationship advice. And that impulse to say really lovey-dovey, emotionally weighty things early on in a relationship is actually really normal. There's been a ton of research about what's going on in our brains, like at a neurological level when we're starting to fall for someone, and it's fascinating to read about. And researchers have dubbed the early stage of a relationship with someone the honeymoon stage because it feels like you're on an emotional honeymoon like every single time you're with them. Like during this stage, your brain is literally flooded with the pleasure hormone called dopamine, which gives you this kind of emotional high whenever you're with that person. And that's why early on in a relationship, it feels so perfect and effortless and easy. And you're like, I don't think I could ever get mad at this person. They can never do anything that annoy me. Like, it just feels so perfect. And I'm not gonna lie, like, it's a very fun stage of a relationship to be in. But here's the thing. Eventually, you'll come down from that emotional high. You'll leave the honeymoon stage, and you'll start to see the person you're dating in a more realistic light. You'll slowly become more aware of their flaws. You'll become more aware of their imperfections and wounds. You'll probably get in a disagreement or a fight or a couple. And I'm not saying you can't say those super serious things early on before you leave the honeymoon stage. Again, I'm not trying to turn this into some kind of weird formula for you to follow. I'm not trying to be the timeline police. But I do think there's something uniquely beautiful and uniquely Christian about saying those kinds of things to someone once you've seen them in a more honest light. Once enough time has passed that you see each other for who you truly are, flaws and all, because that's how Jesus loves us. He sees us for who we truly are, and he loves us anyways, and that's what it looks like to model his love in a romantic relationship. And I don't want you to miss that, because that's actually a really different approach to love. Like when we say I love you to someone as Christians, hopefully we don't just mean I love the way you make me feel. Like feelings are part of it, absolutely, but if that's all you mean when you say you love someone, like that's a very elementary form of love. Because to truly love someone is to see them for who they really are, flaws and all, and to keep choosing them and championing them and desiring what's best for them. That's the kind of love that Jesus models for us, and that's the kind of love he calls us to model in our relationships. Again, don't awaken love before its proper time. There's wisdom in allowing a relationship time to naturally develop and letting our emotional intimacy with somebody build slowly and not too fast. So I encourage you, whether you're currently dating someone or hope to in the future, start thinking through right now, like what are some good boundaries you can have? What are some good physical, yes, but also emotional and spiritual boundaries you can have to save yourself from a lot of heartbreak down the road? All right, last piece of advice I have when it comes to how to date well is to date in community. Date in community. Allow the people closest to you to speak into your relationship and help you discern whether the person you're going on dates with or whether the person you're dating is a good fit for you long term. And specifically, surround yourself with people who will tell you what you need to hear. Tell you what you need to hear. It's very, very easy to surround yourself with people who only tell you what you want to hear. I encourage you don't do that. Don't do it because friends don't let friends date people that are bad for them. Like, you just don't. You love them enough to say something. Like, there's nothing worse to me when somebody's been dating someone for a while and they break up and everybody's like, we hated John the entire time. He was trash. You're like, what the heck? You didn't tell me the 6 months we were dating? Like, you acted like everything was fine. Like, no, that's the worst. And sometimes it doesn't even have to do with the other person. To be real, sometimes it has to do with you. Like I said, me and my roommate have lived together for 5 years, and like, I am very thankful for her because there's been times, even in the current relationship I'm in, where I come home and I'm processing with her, and I'm freaking out, and she's like, lovingly like, I think this is a you problem. Like, I love you, but I think you're responding from a place of woundedness or a place of hurt because you've been hurt in the past, and you're taking that out on him, and like, that's something you need to take and like go process with the Lord. Because I love you, and I'm for your relationship, and I want to watch you self-sabotage. We need friends like that. Those are good friends. They have your best interests. Yeah, we'll snap for that. That's good. So if you're interested in someone, or you're going on dates with someone, or you're in a relationship with someone, I highly encourage you to seek advice and counsel from people you trust. People who are also following Jesus and have your best interests in mind. And this should include not just your friends, absolutely your friends who love the Lord. I'd also highly encourage you to talk to people who are older than you, people who are wiser than you. It's so good to get people or get advice from people who are older and more mature in their faith than us. They tend to just give us a perspective on sex, love, and dating that we desperately need. But if you want to date well, seek the advice of people you trust. And not just seek the advice, like, take it to heart. Put it to action. Proverbs 12:15 says, fools think their own way is right, but the wise listen to others. Like, if your entire community who you trust and they love the Lord all tell you it's a terrible idea to date somebody, and then you do it anyways, like, respectfully, it's kind of on you. I love you enough to say that. It's a little bit on you. Because we all have blind spots. We all need wisdom from people we trust along the way. So if you want to date well, seek advice from people who love the Lord and have your best interests in mind. And this may seem obvious, but I think it's worth saying, as much as you can, introduce your significant other to the important people in your life. Like, go on double dates, hang in group settings, let the people closest to you get to know them. I am a diehard on this. When your friend starts dating someone, it should feel like you are gaining a brother or sister in Christ. They should strengthen, not threaten your sense of community. The person you're dating, again, should very easily, slowly become a part of the life you already have. And so as much as you can, introduce the people you're dating to the people in your life and get to know the people that they're dating too. That's a big part of what it means to date in community. Now I know there's a ton of things I didn't get to talk about tonight. I didn't get to talk about dating apps. How should we feel about them? Or how long should you date somebody? Or how do you know if you're personally in a good enough place to date? I know there's a ton of stuff I didn't hit tonight. But again, I want to encourage you, kind of re-emphasizing that last point, date in community. Like, if there's a question I didn't answer tonight, I highly encourage you to go find people in your life you trust, their wisdom that you trust, and ask them the questions you have about dating that I didn't get to answer tonight. Because again, nothing we do, no sermon you can hear tonight is going to erase your need to rely on God and good community. As we wrap up this series and just kind of wrap up tonight, I want to leave you guys with just a little bit of a word of encouragement. As I've just been praying over you guys, been praying for this specific night for a couple weeks now, the Lord has just continually brought the word holiness to mind. And I know holiness can sound like a really weighty religious word, but it really just means to be set apart. To be holy means to be set apart. And I really do think there's an amazing opportunity to be set apart as Christians in how we go about dating. So many people in our culture today are deeply discouraged by the state of modern dating. Like, it can just feel so transactional and shallow and selfish and short-lived and pointless. Like, just the vibe I get is people are just kind of like, eye roll, I'm done with it, I'm exhausted. But like, what if in this room, just in this room, we decided to kind of rewrite the narrative? Like, I know we can't change the dating culture for all of UK, but what if we committed to doing dating differently in our little corner of campus? Romans 12:2, which was our verse tonight, tells us not to be conformed to the patterns of this world, but to be transformed in the way we think and act. Then we'll be able to know what God's will is for our life, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. So let's commit to doing things differently. Let's be set apart in how we date. Choosing to do things differently won't take away the mess and the vulnerability that's inherent to the dating process, but it will invite God into the process and hopefully showcase his love to the rest of campus along the way. Let's trust that God knows what's best for us and become set apart, holy, noticeably different in the way we in this room go about sex, love, and dating. Let's pray. God, I just thank you so much for everybody in this room. Just thank you that a couple hundred college students would want to come and gather on a rainy Thursday night and just get to know you better and understand your heart better. God, I just thank you that you are such a personal God, that you care about this area of our lives more than we ever will or could ever even imagine. And so I don't know what each student is wrestling with or processing through after 3 weeks of this series, but I just pray you meet them in a special way during this time.